there, and welcome to another edition of the Games of 90. Now, before I talk about the last word, I'd like to say that I decided to expand the scope of the Games of 90. Instead of just having shows that premiered in 1990, or had host changes or significant format changes in 1990, I'm now going to be talking about all the shows that were on in 1990. So, with this new qualification, the last word fits in, even though if it just meant it by 5 whole days. But what about the last word? Well, it teamed up Wink Martindale with his old friend Merrill Heatter and took the show to Vancouver, British Columbia after having a pilot in Los Angeles. So let's talk about the last word, and I'll give you the last word of it after I've done my review. Here's the last word.
Does everybody want?
And now, ready to play the game where the last word is worth everything. Our players, an auto agency manager from Seattle, Dick Taylor, and his celebrity partner from the Hogan family, Edie McClure, and a single woman who loves to travel, Alex Maxinell, and her celebrity partner, star of stage and television, Pat Harrington. And now, here are two words to get us started. Wink Martindale.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. Hello, Patrick. Alex, Dick, Edie, welcome to The Last Word.
The Last Word is a simple word game that paired up a celebrity and a contestant in a battle of quick thinking that kind of aped Scrabble and Chain Reaction a bit for its gameplay. But more on that later. Aside from being Merrill Heatter's last show for 20 years, it's also part of the 1989 class of 3 game shows that debuted in the States, along with Jackpot and Talk About, and actually The Third Degree. The sad thing is that all 4 of these shows will be gone by mid-season, or at the end of the season due to various reasons. We'll get to those in a bit, but The Last Word is a great example of the major topic of this video, and that's CanCon. That's right, CanCon. These are the laws enacted in 1972 that make sure that all shows that were taped in Canada had Canadian interests in mind, or at least a certain chunk of the show had Canadian interest in mind. Now, game shows have a big history with CanCon, and sometimes surviving or even thriving because of being involved with Canada production. They could take the show from LA or New York and instead move it to Calgary or Edmonton or Montreal or Vancouver or Ottawa, and they would benefit from having the show air in 2 countries rather than 1, and also the cost of the budget would be slashed for production, and they could do more with it. So here is your game shows via CanCon Primer, and then we'll get back to the last word. While we're on the subject of American shows airing in Canada, Beat the Clock was one of the first shows to actually do it. Although the first season was taped in New York, Mark Goodson moved the show to Montreal as a cost-saving measure, and CTV in Canada would start airing the show, pretty much satisfying both parties. Jack Nars would host the first 3 seasons of the show before leaving in 1972, because his salary didn't include travel expenses, and the salary would be pretty much wiped out after going back and forth to LA and Montreal. This was also the time CanCon was enacted in 1972, meaning that all programming taped in Canada must have a certain amount of Canadian content in it. For game shows, this usually meant an on-air presence had to have been from Canadian descent, and also the show having to be aired in Canada as well. My assumption is that because Beat the Clock aired in Canada as well as America before CanCon got enacted, it could have been exempted or grandfathered out. But Mark still played ball, and when Gene Wood moved from the announcer booth to host after Jack Nars left, CTV announcer Nick Hollenray would get to announce the show, thus the qualifications were kind of met. The show would run for 2 more years until 1974 when Mark decided to cancel the show. The reason being is that he didn't want to give CTV 50% of the proceeds from advertisers, despite it being immensely popular in both countries. I'd like to think that some deal could have been struck between the two, with maybe CTV getting 33% of the proceeds, but with Mark enjoying a resurgence in America thanks to Concentration to Tell the Truth and syndication, along with Match Game, Tattletales, and The Price is Right on CBS, he decided to cut bait and focus on his American productions instead. In 1990, a short-lived version of Let's Make a Deal would be taped in Vancouver with Monty Hall still at the helm. The show would be co-produced by Catalina Productions, and that name should be familiar to everyone because they are the same production company that went bust after they made Pitfall in 1981, Alex Trebek's favorite show. But more on that later. But as for Let's Make a Deal, it met all of CanCon's rules. It was a Canadian-produced show, but also had a Canadian host, Monty Hall, Thus, the regulations were met. In 1985, Bob Stewart made cable TV game shows using his second and third best properties in Chain Reaction and Jackpot. Jackpot would be the first to be revived in 1985 with Mike Darrow as host and taping in Toronto. This would air on Global in Canada and the USA Network in America. Once again, without anything additional added, we'd have CanCon regulations met. Canadian host, Canadian production. Then we get to the new Chain Reaction in 1986 and having to figure out what to do after Blake Emmons left. When he was on the show, he filled out CanCon rules. After he left the show after a fit about taping in Canada when he thought he'd be taping in Los Angeles, game show legend Jeff Edwards would take the helm. Stewart could trust Jeff to do a great job with the show, seeing as how he filled in for Bill for a couple weeks when he was doing Password Plus when Alan was sick. But with Jeff at the helm, it violated CanCon regulations because Jeff was born in America. This Bob Stewart needed to add a Canadian presence on the show.
Our second contestant today is a phys ed student, and she's planning to go into police work, so watch it.
Watch it, yes.
He would announce the contestants on stage and make a fun end-of-show chain for Jeff Edwards to play with. One of the two of them got to mix it up, and it usually made for some funny moments. With him as an on-screen presence, CanCon was meant to show continue on until 1991 after the $40,000 Chain Reaction tournament ended. And now that brings us to 1989 and the last word. The show's host was Wink Martindale, and he had just come off High Rollers with Heater, and the last word would be the last he would do with the venerable producer that gave him his big break with Gambit. Wink played off well with the panelists and co-hosts and had his charm that he kind of lacked with the Great Getaway Game. Let's be honest, this was the last great performance from Wink before death. And because we need to fill out CanCon regulations, we're given the beautiful hostess and announcer Jennifer Lyle. She plays off Wink well and isn't that bad of an announcer, although I would still take Michelle Roth over her. So you still got a good pair of hosts, a nice set, and catchy music. All it's left to come up with is a clever game, and you got yourself a show. And that is where the last word starts to derail. Not because of Wink, because he was great. Jennifer Lyle was good too. The set looked good, and the music was catchy. But the gameplay pretty much aped Scrabble, and it also aped Chain Reaction. How do you ask? Well, let's find out. The object of the game is to solve the last word of a 3-word puzzle. The computer will give away one letter of each word to start, and the contestants will fill in the letters randomly by hitting a button. If the randomizer lands on a blank space, the letter is revealed and they get a chance to guess the word. If the randomizer lands on a letter already revealed, they must give their opponents a free letter in any place on the board. After placing a letter, being given a letter, or before they place a letter, they can make a guess of a word. If they guess correctly, then they score a word and can continue to guess words or pass control. The person who gets the last word wins the game and a prize based on how many words they did solve. If you only get the last word, you get a prize worth about $100. 2 words mean something around $200, $300. And all 3 words, you get the first 2 prizes and a bonus prize, making it total between $500 and $1,000. This is omnipresent with a lot of Merrill Heatter game shows. They always try to find ways to shovel out as many prizes as they could and get a lot of plugs and give away them as well. As for the format itself, it's okay, but I'd rather have the randomizer going with the contestants stopping it by hitting the button. Sure, it's the same thing that Pressure Luck did, but it makes much more sense than just hitting the button and getting a random, maybe not random letter in the word. I'd rather have someone controlling their own fate rather than a computer. And another negative that I have is that the main game, it was celebrity versus contestant for the first 2 rounds. To be honest, I don't know what they were thinking with this, but why not have the teams play together with one half being in charge of letters and the other half being in charge of guessing? It would have worked just fine. Instead, they went with the $1 million chance of a lifetime route, and to me, it just doesn't work. It would have made the game more lighthearted if you allowed the teams to play together, possibly to make it more like Shoot for the Stars. If you're given a celebrity partner, I'd rather watch work with them instead of having to completely depend on them. The first team to win 2 rounds wins the match and plays the 60-second challenge for an even bigger prize package. In that round, they have 60 seconds to solve 10 puzzles, much like the ones played in the front game. They're given the first 2 words for free, as included the last word with letters appearing in the last word every 2 or so seconds to help them out. For each one right, they get $100, and if they get all 10, they win a prize package, much like the old school Hollywood Square Secret Square jackpots that would usually include a trip. I'll give Heater credit, he makes damn good bonus games. Gambit, High Rollers, the new Battle Stars, they all had good bonus games. It's honestly the best part of the entire show. If we get more interaction like this, then the show would be a lot better. And that's pretty much for what we got in the States. There was just game, and that was it. No real interaction between Wink and the celebrities, and it was just very cut and dry. So what did the Canadian people get in addition to this interesting game? Well, for starters, the Canadian group got an exclusive contest where they answered their own puzzle, and if they were selected for the right answer, they won some prizes. Well, not really that exciting, it would draw interest to the Canadian viewers to keep them watching and possibly win something as well. Also, they got some short celebrity interviews, which are always nice. This also meant that some more humor was there, and they could have really be used to spice up the proceedings in the US version. These two little things would have been fun to have in our version. So that was the last word, and the viewers in America had the last word and didn't watch. It was scuttled off to late night slots and largely forgotten about by most. The show would last about 4 months and be the first game show to be canceled in 1990, ending its run on January 5th. 2 years later, Merrill Heatter sold off all of his properties to King World, so they got the rights to Hollywood Squares and others. He would come back in the summer of 2008 with one of GSM's longest running originals in Catch 21. Merrill was a great producer. It was nice to see him on the dial again, even if he was shackled to Scott Sternberg, the Antichrist of game shows himself. And that was the last word. A show that was quite interesting, but overall not that memorable. Wicked the Crew did a great job, but I really didn't care much for the way the front game was handled. If it was done differently, I'd enjoy it more. But instead, it just comes off more as average. I'm certain that someday the episodes will air on Game TV in Canada, but to be honest, that remains to be seen. And that's going to do it for me. Next time here on the Games of 90, we'll be talking about another 1989 debut, and that is Talk About. Hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye!